Hi, my name is Yi-Chun. I'm the founder of Sioux Falls Chamber Music Collective. We were really fortunate to be able to interview Porter Williams, who was one of the founders of the museum. Here are some very nice stories from his interview. Enjoy.
Zach Van Harris Jr. here with the Sioux Falls Chamber Music Collective. Thank you, Dr. Yi-Chun for putting this together. We're interviewing Mr. Porter Williams today. He's a local artist and historian, collector of many artifacts, and we're going to learn a bit more about him today. Porter, what's your full name and your date of birth?
My full name is Porter Richard Williams. I was born in July 21st, 1942. A long time ago.
Awesome.
Long time ago.
So Porter, where are you from?
I was born in Atchison, Kansas.
Atchison?
Right.
What were the challenges growing up where you were in your household and in the community?
Major challenges was being moved around a lot. I lived in, well, I was born in Atchison, but I don't, as an early childhood, I don't remember Atchison very much. And I lived with my aunt in Leavenworth, Kansas, which is 23 miles away. I remember a little bit about that, you know. If I reach back and recall the earliest, that I can remember is, I must have been 2 years old, and I went to see my father, and he was in a sanitarium because he was dying of tuberculosis. And I remember seeing him in the bed, but what he looked like and everything, I can't remember that, but I remember going into that room. I don't think I got close to him because I really wasn't that close to my father. And then next thing I know, memory is that my sister is saying, she was about 4 years old, "Don't put my daddy in that hole." And they were burying him. I remember living with my aunt. You know, at the time I didn't understand something because my aunt, she cleaned houses and stuff like that. And I can remember she used to take me to work with her. And I'd play with the little girl, the little white girl that was there. And I remember one deal that sticks out in my mind is, and I must have been, I'm thinking 3, 4 years old at that time. She had a birthday party, and we all had on little hats and all the different things. And we're sitting around, you know, the table and getting ready to eat cake and everything. And I remember that little girl's father come home, and he just blew up. I remember him getting what's name, and I know what he said is to get me out of there, you know. And my aunt, I remember crying and stuff, and because I didn't get my cake, I didn't get to eat my cake, and I suppose that was the first and I wasn't even aware of the racism part of it, you know, I didn't connect that. And I always lived in a, you know, I've always been in a ghetto my whole life. I mean, like in Atchison, the part of town that we lived in and everything was, you know, the black people lived there. And I lived in Omaha and Kansas City, and was always in the ghetto. And so I was always raised around black people, so I wasn't really raised around white people at all.
How old were you when that experience happened at that birthday party?
Oh, I must have been, I'm gonna guess, you know, right at 3, 4 years old. Because then I reached back and I try to remember when I went to kindergarten. I was baptized Catholic, so I went to the kindergarten, first, second, and part of the third grade at Catholic schools. I only went to Catholic schools. And then when my aunt, our mother, she took us back to, I think when we first moved, we moved to Kansas City, and then we moved to Omaha, and then eventually we moved to Kansas, and that's the story all itself.
Was education accessible or not accessible to
Well, you know,
African households?
You know, it was accessible, but it was discrimination of, you know, blacks went to black schools, and that was that. The school that I went to, well, the Catholic school was integrated, you know, I mean, but the black school, I mean, schools were segregated.
So how old were you when you went to the Catholic school?
Well, I was, I would say 5, 6, and 7, right? And maybe, or I was 8. I'm trying to recall. Because I know that I started off in Leavenworth. I remember going to, I think, the 3rd grade in Leavenworth, and then I went to Catholic school in, no, when we lived in Kansas City, I think it was in the summer. But then that fall, we went to a Catholic school in Omaha, Nebraska, and went through projects. And then we, my mother moved us back to our hometown. My mother was an alcoholic. I mean, extreme, bad. And so she took us back, and we moved in with, or she moved us in with a friend of hers. And my mom actually took off, abandoned us. And after a few days, that lady was with my little brother, told her to pack up our stuff and get out. So we got out. I was about 8 years old at the time. I was 8 years old, and I thought, well, we'll stay under this bridge until my mother comes in to get us. And I was thinking that my mother was going to come back to get us, and she wasn't coming back. And so after a couple of days of, you know, staying under that bridge waiting for my mother and stuff, my grandfather and my older brother came and found us and took us to their house. And I lived with my grandmother under a very strict deal from 1949 to 1956. And I went to, started out, and I was right in the ghetto, and I can recall that we went to the last segregated class of Lincoln School was, and I was in that class, and because my younger brother they integrated that school at that time, so that would have been a 54. When was the Brown?
Brown versus Board of Education.
Right, when they, right. And so I can remember going to the 9th grade or 8th grade in Atchison, Kansas. And that's when my grandmother, I was getting a little rough to handle. And she, my mother was here in Sioux Falls. And so she brought us up to Sioux Falls and told my mother that my younger brother, he could come back to Atchison with her, but Porter has to stay. You know, when I moved to Sioux Falls, that's when they went to a junior high school, middle school system. You know, the first class of a middle school system was in 1956 when I moved here, and I went to Whittier Junior High School, and really, I was a handful. I mean, I can even look back and, you know, I was really confused, really. I didn't really get along with anybody.
Where do you think that stems from?
Well, I think it stems really from when we lived in Omaha before we moved to Atchison. I'll tell you about this and that happened. I can remember we used to always get chased home from the Catholic school. The black kids would catch us coming through where the segregated schools were, and then they'd chase us. And I was always the fastest, and my brother, and then another guy lived next door to us, and there was about 3 or 4 of us, and they'd always chase us home.
The white kids would chase you?
No, black kids.
Oh, black kids.
And I can remember always getting to the door, man. I could get inside, man, and and I can remember that day that I still remember just as running up to that door, and it went. I reached for the door, and it went click, and my mother locked us out. And so that's when I started to fight, and we beat those kids up, and they didn't chase us home anymore. But we moved somewhere in Omaha, and we were in an upstairs apartment. My mom was beat up, passed out on the couch, and the guy, his name was Stone, was going to kill us. So actually set the apartment on fire and shoved something against the door. There's only one way out. And I can remember have to crawl out the window and down the drain deal, and I ran up the stairs to figure out what was wrong with the door, and because we could only get it open so far, and it was like a stove or refrigerator that they set out in the hallway, and I had to move that out of the way. I couldn't get the deals on fire, I could not, so I had to drag my mother off the couch and down the steps and all. It was, and so I really didn't get along, and right to this day, I don't get along with men. I really have a problem with, you know, I just don't get along with men. Especially bullies. You know, I don't like anybody that would bully somebody. I'd be the first one to stand up, you know, and fight that situation. And it all stems from back then. And I had all this hatred, you know, and I grew up with a huge amount of hate for everybody. I mean, it was, you know, I always respected women. I've always, you know, I don't know. But then you know, living here in Sioux Falls, my mother an alcoholic and everything, you know, I got kicked out of Whittier. Went to the training school, and I more or less was kicked out of training school. Matter of fact, they told me, well, you're going home. You can't come back here, you know. And so, you know, my early child, I didn't have a good childhood, you know. You know, not even like with my grandparents. You know, we weren't allowed to leave the yard in the summertime. Matter of fact, from here to that house, well, half a block away was a swimming pool, black swimming pool. No, couldn't go there. We could go to the playground, but then we went to the playground because my brother was kind of our older brother was kind of our babysitter, and he'd go to the playground, and it just wasn't. And I was always, you know, we had an outdoor toilet, and to heat the house we had with, you know, coal and wood. And I can remember, when I was 10, 11 years old, I was chopping wood, and for stacking up wood for the winter and stuff. So I started off with this work attitude, you know. I just was always a worker. You know, I could do just about anything, and I always tried to work right alongside my uncles and stuff, which was, you know, 8, 9, 10 years older than I. And so I got a good habit of working real hard, you know, calluses on my hands and all that kind of stuff. But then I, in 19, to jump way ahead, because the few black people that lived in Sioux Falls, there was, at my age, there was, what, 3 or 4 of us. And Sioux Falls was really different. There was never a ghetto. And there's still no ghetto in the city of Sioux Falls. I mean, they're trying to form one on the east side, but I can see the black people in Sioux Falls are still spread out. And the churches, you know, they have like, what, 3, 4 churches? I don't really know how many churches they have here. And they all kind of, you know, in Sioux Falls, the black people actually segregate themselves, you know, off into their own little groups and different things. And mostly you'll find out that most of them stick with their church and their group and stuff, you know. And so it's...
How do you think that helps or hinders the black community in Sioux Falls?
Well, it hinders us because of the growth, you know, for opportunities. You know, if we stay divided, we have all these different ways of going about integrating this city, you know. And it was hard, because when I first went to Sioux Falls, it was, Jim Crow lived here. I mean, it was bad.
Okay, so speaking of Jim Crow, what were some of the most common kind of unspoken norms that were dividing black and white communities, but prevalent during that time when you transitioned from Kansas, Nebraska, now you're in South Dakota?
Well, the biggest part was how the black people had to stay to themselves. The only intermingling was at school, or was really at school. And for me, it's the first time that I had white friends. I never had. My best friend when I moved to Sioux Falls was a white kid. Named Donald Schaefer, and he actually taught me how to swim and to hunt, shoot a gun, do different things. Me and this kid, we ran around together from when I was 13, clear up until I was about 16.
That leads into the next question of any meaningful experiences and friendships when growing up during all this hardship. So you said Donald was his name?
Yeah.
Do you still talk to Donald?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So a lifelong friend.
Yeah.
And he's a white guy.
Yeah. Little guy. Little guy, but he was Schaefer. He was just a tough little Irish kid. He, I can remember he was a flyweight champion of South Dakota boxing, because we learned how to box together, and he was always a champion. Him and my older brother. My older brother was a heavyweight champion, and he was a flyweight champion. I had a lot of fights in Sioux Falls. Not as many when I was young, like when I was 13, 14, and 15. But after I got to be about 16, and I started really noticing girls, and my major choice, there was only like 2 or 3 black girls in the Sioux Falls that I could, you know, my age or anything. So majority of them were white girls, and so I had a lot of problems. You know,
So you said like some of the common unspoken norms that divided black and white communities was just black people had a they had a tough time integrating, and they had to kind of be separate.
Yeah, socially, black people had to stay together. You know, we couldn't go down to, well, we couldn't stay in hotels downtown. Black people couldn't go to bars and stuff. And really, they had a line, 8th Street downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Anything south of 8th Street, you couldn't live there.
You mentioned before in the past about to go to clubs or juke joints or things like that, you actually had to leave Sioux Falls.
Right, to go to Sioux City,
Iowa.
Yeah. And usually they had to go at
Night.
At night, because when they got to Beresford was first, and Elk Point, and if they could make it past Elk Point, they could make it to Sioux City, and without being stopped. Otherwise, they'd stop them for, they said they were speeding or they were doing something, you know, just to find out who they were and where they were going, and give them a ticket, and they'd pay the fine, or, you know, whatever it was, $10, $20 or whatever.
The dividing of the communities that was prevalent during that time, back then, what has been improved to this day, and what still needs a lot of work collectively from everyone?
Well, you know, when I come to Sioux Falls, most of the black people that lived here did not, they knew what those boundaries were. And they kind of, you know, they didn't try to integrate. They didn't, you know, all the black men were either cooks or clean, you know, janitors or shoe shine men. And matter of fact, my stepfather, who my mother was on, that's what he was. He was a shoe shine man. And so there was no opportunity. Absolutely none. And all the women, except for a few, I mean, when I say a few, one of them owned a beauty shop. I know she owned a beauty shop, and the other one worked for some kind of investment firm. Other than that, no, they had to clean houses and you know, be maids.
So when did it start to improve as far as career opportunities and just quality of life? When did that start to change?
Early 60s. When I got in 1961, I can recall in 1961 is probably my most pronounced year because Martin Luther King came to Sioux Falls. Couldn't stay in the hotel downtown, so he had to stay at the parsonage, the black parsonage. I wasn't aware of all this until later on, but and that happened in '61. I can remember Bob Hayes, the fastest man in the world. He raced at the NAIA track meet, and he tied the world record in a 100-yard dash, they called it at that time. The Minnesota Vikings played their very first preseason football game they ever played. They played at Howard Field. Played the Dallas Cowboys, and I've been a Dallas Cowboy fan ever since. Well, I got married that year. My first son was born in 1961. I was the heavyweight Golden Glove champion of South Dakota in 1961. Various things happened right along that time. In 1961, my wife and I, who was white, she was actually the queen of Brandon School, and we moved south of A Street, over on right off of Cliff Avenue, R12th and 14th Street or something. I can kind of recall where we lived, and a doctor, I know a doctor owned the house and the property that was around it. And we moved in this house, and he came over with a paper and stuff, and I thought, oh, here we go, we're going to have to get out. And actually he came over with a deal and says, they signed a petition, they want, they served me with this, kind of showed it to me that I had to get out. And he said no. He said, I paid, I think it was like $7,000 he paid for that property and that house and everything. And he says, now I'll sell it to you. And he says, and I'll take your rent for down payment, and that's what your payment on this house would be. And I was thinking, oh geez, all the neighbors signed this petition and everything, wanted me out. And I can remember when I was living with when I didn't live with my wife that long, probably 2 months, 3 months at the longest. All these men came to the door, and I remember grabbing my shotgun and stuff, and thinking that, oh man, I'm gonna have some trouble here. And they had all these things in their hands, and it looks like I thought it was. It looked like guns and stuff, And no, because the lot which I owned next to their house was always mowed, and they put a volleyball. Oh no, they came over with a volleyball deal, and wanted to know if they could use it and play volleyball. They said that they played volleyball, and I said, well, he says, I don't know if you can come out and play volleyball with us. And well, it wasn't much longer than that. My wife and I split ways, and that was in 61, or was it 62 maybe?
How was the relationship with her family? Were they accepting of you, and your family accepting of her?
Oh, not really. Oh, my family was, yeah. My mother actually stood up for us, because in Sioux Falls, a black man couldn't marry a white woman. Had to go to Pipestone. And my mother actually went over and stood up. And we got married when I was 18 years old. We too young to even think about getting married. But she got pregnant, and back then, the way it was, the girl got pregnant, you married her, and that's just the way it was. And
you had 2 kids together?
2 kids. Mm-hmm. And then it was rough, because then me and my wife split. I started going to clubs. I started going to those places I wasn't supposed to go to. And I'd go out and dance with a white girl, and I'd have to either fight on the dance floor or fight when I got off the dance floor. I was going to places. Oh, to back up, I can remember Donnie Schaefer and I and a few other white kids, because I ran around with all white kids. I can remember going downtown to the Woolworths. We went down to Woolworths, and they had a lunch counter. And we sat at the lunch counter, and they went down through all the white kids, and there was about 4 or 5 of us maybe, and they ordered like a hamburger and a Coke. And it got to me, or they skipped by me, and my buddy goes, well, what about him? He says, well, we can't serve him at the counter, at the lunch counter. And what? So they're looking at each other, and the white kids didn't understand it either, you know. And so they bought the hamburger and Coke out to them, and my buddy was either Donnie Schaefer or Larry Rieger, or one of them, took the hamburger and Coke, shoved it over to me, and says, I'd like to have a hamburger and Coke. So then we went and I ate the hamburger and drank the Coke, and we went, like a day or two later, we went back again. And we went up and sat at the lunch counter. They walked right up to me and said, "How can I help you?" But I can remember my aunt, Paul Dysart's mother, gave me the last beating I got from my mother or my aunt or anybody. It was from her for that incident, for going downtown starting trouble. Because black people didn't do that.
How old were you?
Oh, I would say right in that 14 years old, 15 or something like that. And I can recall in 1958, because Paul Dysart's really my first cousin, and he went away to the service. But when he came back in 1960, he came back to a different Sioux Falls. More integration was
Speeding up.
starting to happen.
So would you say that you kind of had a big part in that movement?
I know I was. Yeah, because the black people, I not only did I have trouble with white people, I had trouble with black people. Black people were afraid of what I was doing. I was pushing it. I was over the line way too far, and there was no. I was left out there as a Lone Ranger. Black people in the city of Sioux Falls, in the 60s and the 70s, really kind of shied away from me because I was really too aggressive, way too aggressive for the, because they had to raise their kids. They couldn't lose their jobs. They couldn't, you know, I mean, if they'd have backed me up, they'd have got fired. You know, they'd have been, you know, harassed, like, you know, the cops used to harass me, you know. They just, and the black people in Sioux Falls, when they raised their children and stuff here, the first thing they would do is get them out of the city.
The black community wouldn't associate with you as much as you would have wanted them to. So your white friends and allies, did they catch any flack for
being around me
You got
and being with me? Oh yeah, the guys, you know, the boys, I really got along with, you know, I remember going to, staying at my friend's house overnight and intermingling with white kids. I can recall, this is back, I have to go back, I can recall going to the Arcota Ballroom, which is a shrine building right now. Black people weren't allowed to go in there. Matter of fact, I haven't researched it or anything, but I believe when we went to a teen hop, they called it, and this is back in like, in 56, I believe, when the black kids, we all was going to go to this teen hop, and we all kind of got together, and I can remember there was kind of a holdup when we went to go in, and then they let us in, and I'm not for sure, but I'd almost bet that we were the first black people allowed to come in there and dance on that floor and do things.
So you were the first black to do a lot of things in Sioux Falls in South Dakota. Like, what gave you this courage, I guess? Because, like, you know, I remember, you know, we remember when you mentioned that your brothers admiring how you always defended yourself and you fought against unfair treatment that you would receive. And you spoke about a time where your brother somehow had trouble kind of gearing up enough courage to fight against bullies.
Yeah, my younger brother, he had you know, he really is soft. He's an even going guy. And my older brother was, if I ever had a good whipping by another guy, my older brother used to do that to me on a kind of a regular basis. He was 4 years older than I am and bigger than I am, but he used to beat the snot right out of me, boy. And because I was a mean kid, me and him would, as soon as I look at him and we were going to go at it, I would just go ahead and punch him a few times because that's all I was going to get anyway. You know? And so really my older brother made me be able to take it, not only physically but mentally. You know, I could take it, and to go out against the established racism and stuff in the city of Sioux Falls. I was physically and at the time I thought I was mentally ready for it. You know, I mean, the rest of the black people are not going to do it. They're not going to go down and walk in this restaurant and say and demand that be served, and then the police would come and say, "No, you have to go." Well, no. Then they'd grab a couple of them and grab hold of you and haul you outside, and it's either get going down the street or go to jail.
Do you think that some African Americans are divided to live in the shadows because raising their voices mean violence or destruction or some type of harm may come their ways? It's almost like a double chain of that they were put on, one by the unreasonable laws and oppression, and the other by fear within themselves.
You bet.
They're being deprived of a lot of
Right to this day.
means to fight.
Right to this day. There's black people that live here in Sioux Falls. There's no way are they going to show up down at a demonstration at the park. You didn't see a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of black people in the city of Sioux Falls that didn't show up for that because they don't want to be associated with that. That's the part that's so amazing to me, is that with all those white kids that showed up, young white people, and white people that showed up, just saying, enough's enough, we got to have a change. There's things that are happening here that's going to have to change. And it's for the good. It's the good of the city of Sioux Falls.
And this is, and to provide context, this is in regards to the protest for the George Floyd murder.
Right. But then, you know, I don't agree with what happened, you know. I mean, God, it was just that whole deal to walk and see that 3,000-4,000 people down there was, I'm still in awe of all that, you know. And I had nothing to do with none of it, you know. I mean, I think that they should have protested, and when something kind of went wrong in the city of Sioux Falls, some kind of racism or anything, I was just left out there on that island all by myself. I had to be the one to go over and stand up for it, and I had to do something about it. Whenever anything like that kind of happened, I had to speak up for it.
Do you think there's any other challenges that African Americans find within themselves mentally that they have to overcome other than just the, you know, being able to use their voice? Is there anything else that you...
Education. That's the one thing, man. If you, the lack of education, I kind of feel that, boy, if I could have had a formal education instead of the way I went about being educated, you know, I got like a half a semester at Santa Barbara City College in all art classes. And that didn't help me. It's not as far as being having a formal education. And I think I could have done a lot more, and I could have went about it maybe a little different. You know, it wouldn't have had to been the fisticuffs and all the stuff that, you know. And I wish I could have been more like Martin Luther King and less like Malcolm X. You know, because I was really, you know, I'm a fighter. I mean, I was just, there's just something about me that want me to lash out and go after bigotry and racism and anything close to that. You know, right to this day, if I like if I go into well, just say a department store or something or anything, and I walk up the counter, and they're waiting on somebody else, and somebody, another white person would walk in, and if they wait on him, I take the stuff or either throw it on the floor and walk out. I let them know that they offended me. You know, I let them know that wait a minute, you know, this is not right. I was here first. I'm next in line. And I notice now that, you know, when you walk in the place, they say, "Who's next?" You know, and a lot of times they'll walk up and they'll want to word on this, and then the white people will stand up and say, "Oh, he's next." You know.
You said that you wish that you could have been a lot more Martin and a lot less Malcolm. In a parallel universe, then Sioux Falls may not be what it is today if you were more Martin. Because to be bold and courageous and to take those
Oh yeah, it's
bumps
just
and
like
bruises for a community.
well, you take like affirmative action. It was in 1960. I'm gonna say it, 1965. For 10 years, the city of Sioux Falls and the state of South Dakota didn't do it. They did not
Acknowledge
it, didn't do it, didn't do anything. And I can still recall Rick Noby was the mayor at the time, and this was back in the late 70s. And I can remember Noby saying, "Well, what's our affirmative action plan?" And see that piece of paper he had right there? That was our affirmative action plan. And I can recall some of the department heads saying, "No, we don't do it. We're not going to do it." What? I'm not going to do it. I can recall going to Community Action Agency for HUD money and stuff, and trying to get contracts, and where they would. I can remember walking that Community Action and sitting out in their hall, in their waiting area, and they would come out and they'd look at me, and I must have sat there for an hour. Nobody's in the whole place. I mean, their office, you know, the place in it, but nobody would say anything to me. So I got up and walked out, and then I had this friend, a white friend, that come back that worked there, and said, "If you force them, Porter, they're going to do it. They have to do it." You know, I mean, I had a lot of white people saying how to go about them. But let me tell you about affirmative action, what it did for the city of Sioux Falls. Not only didn't do it for minority people, black people, Native Americans, or they didn't do it for women. All the women in the city of Sioux Falls banging on them typewriters and answering that telephone. That was it. No department heads, no nothing. You know, I mean, they. So I forced the issue. And next thing you know, boy, to go through with a affirmative action, they were doing thing with. First, they did it with white women. You know, move them up in positions and stuff, saying that we're doing this, you know, and very little would they work with within the minority community. Oh, there was places like the telephone company and postmen and Ramirez plant didn't hire black people. They started hiring black people. You know, and to work at Ramirez was middle class. If you could get a job at Ramirez, boy, you were. You know, that means that you could buy a house and you could have a boat, you could go on vacation, you probably could have a new car, you know. But they didn't hire, at the time, they didn't hire black people. So they had federal contracts. So this all come into play, you know, that they had to try to, you know, It's not like it is today. You know, you can go to Morel's today, and well, Morel's is not a, it's just a mediocre job. I mean, that's, there's nothing, you'd be lucky if you could buy a house, working at Morel's, you know. So I ended up working for the establishment for the.
So you talked about education, and that segues into our second part of this interview. Before we get close to wrapping up, people of color, communities of color, is no longer a minority anymore, and the power structure and dynamic, even in the wording of majority versus minority, it perpetuates majority has power over the minority. So communities of color have been trying to do away with that word because we're not little, we're not, you know, less any, you know, in that mindset. So education, when did you start collecting art and becoming a collector? Do you remember the first time, like the story about the hotel sale?
Well, you know, in 1989, you know, there is parts of this story that I haven't told you about. For possession and sales of marijuana, this is back in 1958.
That's fine.
Was that in South Dakota?
Mhm.
So you were still a young buck in the 50s?
Yeah, 50, well, I was 24, 5 years old. But
Was that just jail or prison?
prison, I was in there.
3 years.
And when I made parole, this is honestly the truth, when I made parole, I was such an evil person in prison. I mean, I didn't get along with nobody. I mean, absolutely nobody. I just didn't fit. For some reason, I didn't, you know, they all kind of got along, you know, talking about their little stories of whatever they were robbing, thieving, stealing, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, whoa, no. When I made parole and got out of prison, the inmates cheered, the guards cheered. This Native American stood up and hollered out. I knew it was Native, I could tell by the voice saying, "I don't care, just get that black son of a bitch out of here." They wanted me out. They didn't want me in there. Prison didn't even want me in there. I was so what's name. And then I was out of prison a few years. That was in early 70s. That's when I went to Santa Barbara. I went to college, or I was trying to find myself. You know. And I had a white friend that was here in Sioux Falls, and we're still friends to this day. And he's the one that taught me to go into Santa Barbara City College. He was going to the university, and when he become a nuclear physicist engineer. And so the formal education I have is actually from the people that I associated with, that I ran around with. I always ran around with people that had something kind of going for themselves. I didn't hang out with, even though I know those people, you know, with the thugs, you know, people that's like welfare. I know my mother used welfare and food stamps and all. No, I've never been on welfare. I don't even know what a food stamp deal looks like. I've always been a hard-working person. You know, I mean, I'll do it the hard way. I mean, if I have to go out and dig a ditch, then that's you know, that was always. I could always work. I could always get a job. Always, you know, construction companies. I'm looking for a job. Well, yeah, you can go to work for us. You know. Here, take this shovel.
You said that you had a vehicle and the N-word was spray paint on it, and you drove it all the way
to California, back to California. That's when I got out of prison. I had this old bread truck. I made it into the driving part, and then the whole back end part was a great big bedroom-like deal. Had a closet and a bed and everything in it. And I was going with this white girl here. She's from Canton. I'm not going to say her name, but we were going together. And her boyfriend at the time, she dumped him, and then he got a bunch of guys, and they spray painted my bread truck. And it said on the side of a nigger, "Get out of town." And I left that on there. And when I drove it all the way back to California, I worked for a company out there called Wagons West, and they converted vans and stuff like that. And I can remember this guy named David Jones, a white guy. Matter of fact, he gave me a ring, and I still have the ring in it. And he was kind of a rough guy, and he actually had tears in his eyes. He says, "You mean they really did that?" And he says, "Take this van," and they redid a van. He says, "And go back to Santa Barbara, and when you come back next weekend, because I work there on the weekends, we'll have your truck." He said, "We're going to redo that truck of yours." And he redid the whole thing. Painted it, went in, stripped it out, redid the whole thing, carpet, the whole everything, you know. And when I come back, I had my bread truck, and I lived in that bread truck when I lived in Santa Barbara. I worked for the harbor master, and I could stay in my truck, and shower and all that kind of stuff and everything. So it was kind of like, but then I came to Sioux Falls, back to Sioux Falls, and ran into this lady, took her back to California with me. And 2 months later, we got married. That's Glennis.
Your wife today.
Yeah. And things were still rough for me. You know, she couldn't handle California. It was just too fast for her. Just right for me. It was she was afraid of California.
Did you both get into collecting together, or?
No, what happened is I went over to a friend of mine that had an antique shop. An old guy come in there with a grandfather's clock. And he gave him $400 for that grandfather's clock, and I helped him carry it into the store. And he gave the guy the $400. The guy left. He calls up, it was a motel or something. I forget where. I know it was in Orange County. And he says, "Well, I have a grandfather's clock." And he says, "Well, I want $4,000. And he hung up the phone. He says, "Let's load her up." He took it over and sold it to that guy. He paid $400. He got $4,000. And I thought, whoa, antiques, you know. Man, they got a lot of antiques in South Dakota. So I went home and I went to work the next day at Raytheon's. The people that build the Patriot missiles and all that kind of stuff. I used to be their spray painter and stuff. Told them I'm done. I need a check. And went home. Packed up all of our stuff in that bread truck. And last night I came back, Sioux Falls. And that's when I came back into finding out about affirmative action, finding about community action agency, and the discrimination that was actually still here, that was still going on. Things that the city of Sioux Falls wasn't changing very much at all, you know. But then, you know, younger black people at college and stuff, they were starting to come here. And then the racial thing was starting to more intermingle, you know, they were, Sioux Falls was changing, you know. But the opportunities, there was no black policeman, there was no black fireman, there was no, you know, it just wasn't working. Nobody was working that end of it. And these younger black kids were trying to get an education and stuff, and they, you know.
So you started collecting antiques,
Mm-hmm.
and then what made you focus on collecting particular types of antiques, like the Blackface, the Americana?
Well, what happened is in 1989, I got introduced to sculpture, three-dimensional sculpture. And all along, I always wanted to be an artist my whole life. Even being a child, I was always trying to draw and do different things. Then when I went to Santa Barbara, I learned how to paint. And I thought, well, I can paint a lot better than I can draw. And right to this day, I can paint a lot better than I can draw. But then I was just like, hit a brick wall. I couldn't get any better at painting. This is it. So I quit. Gave away all my oil paints, canvases, and everything. And for I would say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, I dropped out of the art scene altogether. And then a professor over at Augustana College said that we're going to have this crash course in portrait sculpting. I said, what? He says, you can do it. He said, I know you can do it. He said, I watch you landscape. I watch you do a lot of things. You're three-dimensional. And when he said that, it reminded me of a professor at Santa Barbara City College. He told me I was three-dimensional. And I didn't understand it. I don't mean three-dimensional. He said, I don't know. He says, you're three-dimensional. And I can remember him saying that. And then Steve Thomas told me I was three-dimensional. And he says, you could do it. And so I stood up just armature and stuff and started this class. 2 days later, I just knew it. It was like it almost went off in my head. Yeah, I can do this. I can. And so I started sculpting, and then I got into history. I did this white man that set for us to do this crash course, 2-week crash course. But my very next sculpture was Kenny Anderson. It's the one that's in the Kennedy Community Center. And it's an all-right sculpture. It's, I could have, I'm a lot better now than I was then. But, and then I got to thinking about, then I got into York. And white people didn't know about York.
Who is York?
York's the first black man to ever come to South Dakota. He was William Clark of the Lewis and Clark Expedition's slave. And then as I got into this deal, and then people were saying, not only white people, but black people absolutely didn't know anything. What do you mean a black person was on the expedition? Well, yeah, slave York. And it wouldn't have been for him, they'd have never made it. Right? In my heart and soul and everything, I know for a fact they would have never made it. They might have never made it past Pierce, South Dakota, when those Indians grabbed a hold of the tow rope of the keel boat. But they wanted their wives and everybody to come down and look at this boat and this black man.
Why?
Because black's a very honorable and a very sacred color as far as the Native Americans are concerned. And when they go out and they kill like a mountain lion or grizzly bear or fight the enemy and what's name, before they got back to the village, they'd always build a fire. And whoever these honored ones were, they'd take the charcoal and they'd turn themselves black. And they'd come riding into the village, and then everybody'd go, oh, there's Eagle Bear. Man, he's honored, But they also knew one thing, is that it washed off. So it was like a fake high. But then they found this man that it didn't wash off. He had to be a god or something. It was York had quite an experience on that expedition. The chiefs of the different tribes and stuff along the way would have York sleep with their wives and stuff, just to get that bloodline into their, they wanted that black bloodline, thinking that these were gods, And, experiences that I had in Sioux Falls, yeah, I was a god, all right,
All right, with that being said,
Yeah. No.
what is your mission in art?
What my mission is that right now, when I started out with that sculpting, I wanted to do the evolution of Black America. I was thinking about all of the things that happened with Black people and how they came to America and the whole thing. But then I got locked down into South Dakota and different things that Black people have done in South Dakota, and that wasn't recorded. But then and this is the same time I was dealing antiques, and to get into my only hang-up with like doing art and everything was slavery. I never had to look at slavery, to deal with it head on. You know, that to get into the evolution of Black America, you're going to have to get right back into slavery, and you're going to have to deal with that. And so then I started looking at all these different items that I used to kind of bust up or throw it away and wouldn't buy it, and derogatory items, and Jemima, and the Black girls had to go through it. Look at that Jemima over there and all this, and this stuff, and I was thinking, wait a minute, they actually did these things to us for amusement, for white people who were being, they send the postcards and all the different things that they, and really, what's the word? They were trying to, in other words, to hold these items is what held Black America in our place. To let everybody know that we were, I don't like to use the N-word, we were colored people. We were less than, and I thought, wow.
So it was for them to feel superior or something?
That's the word I was looking for. And so now that white people come into my house and they look at all this stuff and they, wow, if this Black man can handle this, why can't? And then you can see the transition of, wow, if he can handle it, then I started to notice that white people weren't handling it too well either. Because they always kind of hid those items. They'd have them, they'd bring them out just for the amusement of whoever they were with or anything. But no, they, when it comes down to race relations, white people have just as much on their mind when it comes down to race relations that Black people do. They just don't know how to go about it. But this new generation, this younger age, this new, Dr. Chandler and yourself, are making it a lot easier for people to get along, or a lot easier for people to understand what the difference is. There's a gap between Porter Williams in the early 60s and Porter Williams doing the 80s. There's a whole gap there that nobody stepped up. And then there's another gap between the 80s and now. Black people didn't step up. When I started that museum, Black people were like, do we want to go into this? When I went out to Pier and went to that historical museum they have out there, and they have Native Americans, white people, Asians, no black people. Like we didn't even exist.
They even got the Ku Klux Klan in the
Right,
museum.
and they have the Ku Klux Klan there and everything. And the last time I was there and I looked at that Ku Klux Klan deal, I haven't been back. As a matter of fact, when we were out there, remember when we went up and said, well, shall we go up there? And I really didn't want to go up there.
Yeah.
And if we went up there, I'd sit out in the car. I mean, I just, and that's really when you guys took over Laura and you take over the museum, and because I've been after this museum. 2 years before there was a museum, I wanted to have a museum and someplace to start leaving my art and different things of South Dakota. I was getting this information of, you know, Cleveland Abbott and all these different people that they haven't talked about. And I wanted to leave it somewhere to do something with it. And all along I'm collecting black imagery and stuff, so that was really the historical part of it. And in the museum, it happened, and we started then wasn't getting the, you know, there's black people in the city of Sioux Falls that could have jumped in and made the museum really grow, and it's still like that. But you guys are gonna have to figure that out, you know, that when you have to go to those different churches and look at those people that are in those different, the black people that you don't see. And the only way you're going to be able to do it is that you're going to have to go to those different black churches and introduce yourself to those people and be around them. And then you'll know what it's like in this city. You know, I mean, just stand off by yourselves. You're kind of by yourselves because there's like Pastor Judy has her church. What do they call it? Silver by Alexander College. Used to be downtown, but she sold that church. And then there's
Pastor Tawana.
Tuan. Where's he at?
Get that area.
On the east side?
I'm still kind of new here.
Well, there's about like 3, 4, 5 black churches in Sioux Falls, and they all have their own different groups of people. You know, there's black people here that work in banks. There's doctors here in Sioux Falls. There's different people here in Sioux Falls that your generation is going to have to reach out to them because they're not coming to you. There is a few black people that will show up at events that they have, like with Camian and Bonnie. You know, they'll show up for their events and you know, participate. You know, very few.
Why does art matter, and how do you want to convey to people through your artwork?
Well, now you know that I've recorded all black history, that's right, in South Dakota, that I'm not really into going much further with it. And now I'm back to when I began, the evolution of Black America. And what I'm trying to convey is that we, as black people, have a beginning in America. And our beginning is slavery. And I wear the shackle. I've been wearing the shackle for almost 30 years. And it reminds me every day of how far we've come. And we've come a long ways from coming out of that era of time of slavery. It's 300 years of bondage, you know, and everything to overcome that. How do we live through that? How do we, you know, the racism, the practice of discrimination, and all the things that we had to go through, all the way down to getting that knee on the neck, to make the knee on the neck when that man was saying, "I can't breathe." and to understand that we've had a knee on our neck all this time. You know, all this time we've been.
The shackle symbolizes that struggle, the evolution of the African American. Is there anything that can happen that will make that shackle come off? That be like, you know what, this is a big moment in African American history.
No, this is the end. This is the beginning for me, and it's really the end. You know, when as far as I'm concerned, when that shackle comes off, that's when they cremate me.
So if something monumental happened, like, and they say, you know what, we was tripping for a long time, let's go ahead and give them reparations, something crazy big, that wouldn't make you think like, oh wow, shackle comes off?
No. Never come off. Even if they gave us reparation. You know, reparation, they tried reparation with affirmative action.
But everybody that receives benefits from affirmative action didn't have ancestors with slaves.
Right.
So like so reparation would be for just the slave. Like, so
Well,
affirmative
reparation at the time is that they were trying to make up for slavery. When they first started with affirmative action, it was 10%. It's supposed to be, you know, any 10% of whatever government. But then they started hiring black policemen, black firemen, and black people were moving up so fast and starting to move into more segregated society and everything, man, moving out into the suburbs and doing all kinds of things. And black people were moving up so fast that they had to slow it up. You know, and that's the only thing I really have against the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Because they got together to do this civil rights bill. They got together with affirmative action and stuff, but then they slowed it up. And that was white men. You know, so they threw in disabled. They put that in affirmative action. They used to be separate. White women, that used to be separate. That didn't have nothing to do with people of color. But then they threw that all into the pie, and they knew one thing, that as soon as white women got into the deal that their fathers gave them money, if they go to the bank, or their fathers, if they had 51% ownership of the company, that their brother's company, or their dad's company, or their uncle's cousin company, well, pretty soon, affirmative action didn't work for us. The reparation that they dangled that carrot in front of us, and they jerked it away. And the only ones that made it through the whole thing was the very best. And that's the way it is today. The very educated, the very best black people there is involved are the ones that are going to get the opportunity. Otherwise, no.
Your vision for Sioux Falls and for South Dakota, what motivated you to create the African American Museum, History Museum in the first place?
A lack of knowledge of black people's existence in the city, in the state of South Dakota. And we were here all along. You know, we were here. We've been here. We're going to be here. We are here. You know, South Dakota really has a, you know, and you dig back and look at the Martin Luther King holiday. Mm-hmm. Well, all of the states in the United States, South Dakota wasn't the last to recognize that holiday, but they were second last. Arizona was last.
what is your vision towards the future of the African American community in South Dakota? What is your vision towards the future of the black community in South Dakota?
Well, I'm talking to the vision. I'm not going any further. I'm at the end of the road. You know, the only thing I can see down there at the end of the road is it says dead end. You know, and so whatever happens from now on, the younger generation, your generation, is going to have to step up. You know, and you're stepping up. And the thing is, you got people. We've got you. You know, you've got your back. I never had. You know.
What would help bring people together to provide a more friendly environment for our future generations? What kind of ideas and things that can...
Well, you know, the togetherness, you know, like that demonstration for the protest was the beginning of it all. You know, I see every day that I watch the news media and stuff that's getting involved in it. And before, they wouldn't get involved. You know, I mean, they would do a little blurb on it, and that was it, the end of it. But this seems like it keeps carrying. It's got momentum, and it's carrying on. It's carrying on. You know, when they took it and painted it in the street, Black Lives Matter. You know, a year ago, I wouldn't wear this. But after seeing what happened down at that demonstration, sure, Black Lives Matter. And a lot of people say, well, you know, all lives matter. Yeah, but Black lives didn't really matter. Usually when a black man got shot, killed, even a year or so ago, it was like, so what? You know?
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. You hear it, you know, you say Black Lives Matter, and then somebody say, oh, all lives matter. So if you say Black lives don't matter, will someone say all lives don't matter? It's just, you see, the weight of it is different.
Right, yeah. Yeah. You know, it's just like, back in the 60s, you know, to be born white means that you were born privileged. And if you didn't know the difference of not being able to work at Morales, or go downtown and eat in a restaurant, or stay at a hotel, and have to, what's your name is, if you look back at that and see, and if you can't see and feel the difference, you don't know what the word privilege means. You know?
So, your wife is also a collector, and what was Glenna's influence on your art and life?
I wouldn't have had the opportunity to actually go into this second phase and final phase of my life if it wouldn't have been for her. And just, you know, to stand by me, you know, even though I don't really come out, you know, but she's got my back, you know. It's just the way it is.
You said that there's even items that sometimes she will find and,
right,
you know, and add to the collection.
Oh yeah, she's into it. You know, I mean, I add really when it comes down to African American stuff, historical things, items, and stuff. On the last, let's just say 6 years or so. And 90% of it, she's the one that went out and found it or purchased it. You know, big items. You know, I grab hold of big items. You know, I'm after cast iron stuff, sculptured things. You know.
So that transitions to the very last question, and it's a double question. What are the top 5, or it don't have to be 5, but what are some of your top 5 artifacts or pieces of art that you've collected, and why are they important to you and the history behind them?
The top 2 pieces that I have are the hitching posts that I have. One is in my studio, in my room, art room, and the other one's out on the front porch, the hitching post. It's just that the feeling of the negative part of a black man standing there to hold the horse, to hold the, what's the name?
I was going to say, what is a hitching post?
Well, that's where they hitched up the horse. They tie the rings to that big iron hitching post, and if it's real heavy, when the horse tried to pull away, it wouldn't do it. You know, if it was something, it's like somebody's holding it. You know? That horse is trained that way, just like Black America. We are the hitching post.
Any last words?
No.
I have a question.
Okay.
It's important to feel like somebody got our back, right? So would you say when you were struggling in your teens, or like, you know, when you were growing up, like art,
Mm-hmm.
to a certain degree served as that purpose? When you started, you know, doing sculpting, and did you feel a you know, some kind of peace?
Like, was it
Like
like a way to escape and just kind of...
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
escape
yeah.
the reality.
Oh, yeah, you've got, you know, Glenn would know more than anybody that, you know, sometimes I can be in there sculpting, and especially in, like, you know, now football, I'm really messed up with basketball. I'd be watching basketball, and I have earphones on, listening to music, and I'm sculpting. And she's standing there looking at me like, there's something wrong with you, dude. You know, and there's you're off into a
It's almost meditative, like a trance. So
sure.
I guess like you probably sense that like the younger generation, they you know, there's a trend that we want to make changes,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, there's
and that's
such a-
actually great.
Oh man, there's such a this is nothing. I mean, your generation is nothing like our generation. There's your mom's generation is nothing like what I went through. You know, she went through it, and she can you know, I mean, she can feel it. You know, but to feel something and to live something is different. You know, I mean, to feel racism and discrimination and bigotry is one thing, but to live in it,
right.
to actually live in it, you know, now your generation, all you can do is feel it. You know, you can tell when you walk into a place where, you know, have you ever walked in, like you and Laura, have you ever walked in a place and when you walk up to the door, it's kind of noisy and stuff, people are telling you, as soon as you walk in the door, kind of like a little hush. Kind of like the, you know, place gets kind of quiet. And then you kind of look in the mirror where you're in some guy over there going, there it is, you know, and it's still there. You know, especially, not so much, so it's changing. I mean, it's just the weight of it all, you know. You know, before the N-word would be howled out. Who let them put this in here? What? You know, you hardly ever hear that word. Do you hear that word a lot?
No, not a lot. Not a
You
lot.
hear it, but
Yeah, but not a lot.
yeah.
What would you like to see? Everything that you have collected, all your antiques, all this, the collective items. What would you like to see happen to these pieces of art and the space that it's in 20 years from now, 30 years from now?
I don't know. If Glennis is still here, then it's all mine. If I'm not here, it's all hers. Then it's on her side, she has a nephew. She's gonna give it to him. On my side, I have a son that I'd give it to. And what they would do with it, all I can do with it now is record it. You know,
like this place couldn't exist as your foundation, like the Porter and Glennis Williams Foundation House or the Education Center or a museum.
Mm. No, too many small items. You have to, I usually don't let a lot of people, I mean, there are a lot of people don't come here. And, because it's just too many little things, too
But
many.
you know how like you got like the Elvis Presley, what is it called? Elvis Presley house or mansion, they call it like the
Oh, museum.
Yeah.
Like it's the old house, but
yeah, but like the name
the house
of it.
is a museum.
Yeah, but so like you'll have like where it's like
Graceland.
yeah, Graceland, thank you.
I had to think about that myself. And,
But it's it adds to the legacy of what you and Glennis have done. The narrative of your life story continues.
kind of, sort of, it's,
I'm just thinking about the future of the black community here,
Mhm.
and that's why you started the museum, right?
well,
How you
really
found
the
it.
museum started off with my art,
Oh yeah, with your art.
with my sculptures and,
Right.
and
Yeah.
things like that, yeah.
And
But the vision, I think, is where you're going.
yeah, I think I was just thinking, like
Well, that's a different,
that's
it's
a
really,
different thing,
there's a separation there
right?
between the collection of
Mm-hmm.
black memorabilia and history.
Mm.
I mean, they really, sure, I'm a black man that collect both ways. I do black art and I collect black memorabilia. But are they the same? No.
Mm. Right,
There's
right.
a separation there of, so it was hard for me to separate from my collection. It's not at the museum.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I would entertain doing a fundraiser or something at the museum, taking items and doing a whole display of black memorabilia. I would like to get a hold of Carl Eller, I think his name is, not Alan Page, Minnesota Viking, that everybody around here just loves Vikings. And he collects African American
Memorabilia.
Yeah. And I'd like to do a
Collaboration.
collaboration of him here in the city of Sioux Falls somewhere, and where people would pay to actually come in to see Alan Page and look at the collection and everything, and do that as a donation to like the museum or something.
Have you been to many museums around the nation?
No.
We've traveled to different African American museums throughout the nation.
Have you?
And some are houses like this.
Oh, I know, like in Denver.
Yeah, and they have the memorabilia kind of set up like this, but the only difference is like the memorabilia, it would be more thematic per room. So you're entering this room, and this room is
Right.
they're talking about the Aunt Jemima, the Blackface, and then another room is something. It wouldn't be all throughout the house like one continuous thing. It would be
Well, right. Well, a lot of them wouldn't have this much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of them would, but a lot of them wouldn't have so much varied. I mean, wow. I mean, there's enough stuff in here to do. I mean, a house. Well, it is a house of collectibles. Like Glennis has a couple of magazines that she does, especially like Aunt Jemima. There's people that just collect Aunt Jemima, just period. Most black people don't collect Aunt Jemima, and they collect other black items and hitching posts, and they won't go to that extreme. Most black people only keep their collection into a cream of wheat.
When we were in Oklahoma City, the African American Museum there, there's a lot of similar, and they even got some stuff that is, some black people would say is even further cringy.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd be surprised the more you travel and see other places that.
Well, I'm sure, because my collection is really like sitting out by the driveway as a black boy, like on our pond, the fisher, yeah. And actually, the one out on the pond made a mold and actually poured a concrete one, and that's the one that's sitting out there. And I have the mold to be able to cast the iron one, bronze one, concrete one.
Do like an iron pour.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like just was thinking like collecting everything, and then 20, 30 years from now, and then if it's just sold off, then collecting it, would it be almost all for like what would have been like the long-term goal or purpose if we want to?
Why do we collect it?
To pass it on so more collectors can add to the collection and keep
Right,
it.
to make sure it don't get destroyed.
Right.
I would say, see, a lot of people would think that, and that's what's their whole deal about slavery and not teaching it in school, is that one day that it will just
Go away.
go away. Right, that whole ideology and mentality with the virus. Oh, it'll just disappear one day. It'll just magically gone, poof. It won't be with us any longer. Now it's starting to really go rampant and go out of control, especially in those areas where they didn't protect themselves. And now they're talking about school. Are you kidding me? I mean, there's no way that kids are supposed to go to. They should stay at home right now until they really got some kind of vaccine or something to handle it. No, there shouldn't be any. As much as I love football, as much as I love basketball, no. So all those big arenas and all that kind of stuff, no. If they're not going to do anything about that, then die with it, because that's exactly what's going to happen. It's just like right now, Sioux Falls used to have, when it comes down to the virus and stuff, they were dying here. They weren't dying out west. What was it, 4 or 5 of them died out there? And they were all hugging up on each other and everything.
I really like when Porter was saying about education. Because I feel, a part of me feel museum, all those things, they are informative, very important, symbolic. But our hope is the next generation, right? And I think that's why we're doing this. We try to pass this wisdom to the next generation. But at the same time, we need to help the kids who don't have the ability to even get proper education, or they're in trouble, situations. So I feel that's my revelation getting out of this conversations, that education should also be another really big focus. How can we help those kids, right? Being confused all the time, and no guidance. And
You have to figure it out on their
yeah,
own.
yeah. Especially now, there's more open-minded people.
You take like the younger generations, the ones
Right.
that were down at that was saying, is that, they weren't really aware of what's happening to black people in this country until that 9 minutes and 30 or 40 seconds with that knee on that guy's neck, and the way they treated it, when they jerked him up to put him on that gurney, he was dead. The guy was dead. They can say all they want that he died at the hospital, or that's where they pronounced him dead. But you could tell the limp body, the way they threw him on that, and the way they threw him on that cart, like, and white America took a look at that and said, oh, wait a minute, that's not even humane. That's, we wouldn't even, if we was at war and with whoever, we would treat them like that. And then here's Americans. You know? And here we are treating them like
Less than human.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you.
All right.
Right.
Thank you.